Recently, most people know about Disney's new Ariel live-action movie where they cast actor Halle Bailey to play the role as a Little Mermaid. However, this quickly made a lot of people upset, gathering about 3.1 million dislikes in contrast to 1 million likes. So I want to be talking about why I believe people are hating on this new casting choice and other race-bending situations, such as the new Scooby Doo remake, and the common arguments I've seen against people who dislike it. Many people are offended by Ariel's actor choice because they believe this is the equivalent to whitewashing, saying things such as, "Imagine if I were to make Tiana white." But this sort of argument has a very obvious answer. The reason why turning Tiana, or any other Disney princess such as Mulan, white would get backlash is because their race is important to the story. First off, Mulan's whole story takes inspiration from an actual Chinese folklore tale. Not only does the story take place in China, hence the shot of the Great Wall of China at the very start of the movie, it is actually important to the story as it would not make sense if the setting was taking place in a different country, because there's a lot of cultural references to Chinese culture in the movie, which would have been lost if they decided to change Mulan's race and story to a different ethnicity. Second of all, Tiana, as most people already know, is based off of a real person. Unlike Ariel, who is a fictional mermaid, Tiana is based off of a black woman named Leah Chase living in New Orleans during the 1920s. She was a woman who ran a restaurant and was an important figure to the black community at the time because she helped with the civil rights movement by making her restaurant the meeting place for activists to strategize together during the civil rights movement. Sadly, she died 3 years ago in 2019, which is very recent, and that date actually kind of shocked me when I researched about her. But if it wasn't obvious enough as to why it would be disrespectful to make a real person white, even if hypothetically speaking that Tiana was not a real person and this was just a fictional character, Tiana's race is actually important to the story. Even the film writers and directors claim that their decision to depict Tiana as an African American young woman came naturally as a result of the location in which the story takes place. The fact that she's a black woman living in the 1920s who has lower income and is running her own business definitely helps shape our perspectives of her struggles.
You know how long it took me to save that money?
Exactly. Which is why a little woman of your background would have had her hands full trying to run a big business like that, you know.
Meaning that Tiana's race is very important to her character, also being the first African Disney princess. All of these reasons are why it would be disrespectful to make her white. Interesting enough, if you actually look at all the Disney princesses or many characters in general, you would notice that when a character has darker skin or a certain ethnicity, it is usually related to their story because white is considered the default for characters. You don't need to provide a reason why a character is white since no one questions it, but when a character is of a different skin color, it's now considered political. For example, if a character turned out to be part of the LGBT community, people would question this and ask, quote, "Why are they gay has nothing to do with the story." But no one has asked that question when it comes to straight character in the show having a partner, because being straight is considered the default, whereas being gay is considered a political identity. The reason why we're having this discussion right now is because when people found out that Halle Bailey took the role of Ariel, people assumed it was because of her race and not because she had an amazing voice. Even when Marshall, the man who picked Halle, was explaining why he decided to choose her, he said it was because she had a beautiful voice. For hell's sakes, he even said he cried. And if you never watched Ariel, basically her singing voice was one of the most important parts of The Little Mermaid. Not only is it the first mention of Ariel in the movie, her voice is what attracted the main antagonist to go after her in the first place. If she had a mediocre voice and was the same as all the other mermaids, it gives less of an interesting incentive for Ursula to specifically steal her voice. In addition to that, Ariel's voice is literally what makes the prince fall in love with her, which is why it makes perfect sense to hire the actor with the best voice. As I explained, in the story of The Little Mermaid, her race did not matter. Not even the red hair, which many people, including me, didn't like, that everything else was more dulled out. I understand that it's not the actor's fault, so I'm not going to blame it on her. But the main thing that was important to Little Mermaid was that, well, she was a mermaid. And two, she has a beautiful voice, which is why Ursula tried to steal it from her. If you really think about it realistically, it would make sense to choose the actor with the best voice, and I generally don't understand why people think they chose Halle because of her race, because that doesn't make any sense. Do you seriously think they would want to get this backlash? I would argue if they had a white actor do this role, it wouldn't get remotely the amount of hate as she did, even if they had brown hair. So I don't like it when people say they went woke for money, yet even the directors were scared and knew that the backlash was going to be bad. Of course, not this bad. But if you're going to complain about a company going woke, maybe stick to criticizing them for things they actually chose to happen. Like, for example, Scooby Doo's reboot was very random in my opinion. Like removing Scooby Doo, the main mascot of the show, out of it because his existence was, I quote, too childish. And there wasn't really a point in changing Velma and Daphne's ethnicity to both be Asian. I mean, I'm not Indian, so I can't say much about her. But for Daphne, I'm Chinese, so I think I'm allowed to say this. I really don't like it. Like, I can tell that all these redesigns are done to make them look like they're voice actors, like a self-insert. This is very unnecessary. You don't need to be the same race or look like the character in order to be a voice actor for the character. For hell's sake, most of the times I don't even know who's the voice actor for a lot of the shows I watch. And lastly, I don't even know where to begin with this one. Why does Shaggy have a clean cut? Why is he so calm and he looks like he has a stable job? He looks like his life is together. Why does it look like he's not on constant meth? Like, honestly, I don't even care about his race change anymore. There's just so many things about the reboot. To Velma literally being an internet troll and sending death threats in the trailer. In my opinion, it makes more sense to criticize decisions like this instead of hating on an actor who rightfully deserved their role in a movie. I wholeheartedly believe that if Ariel was played by a white actor who is just as talented as Halle Bailey, I wouldn't even have to make this video because no one would hate on it. That's why I dislike it when people, on both sides by the way, say, oh, she was hired for representation. No, she was hired because she has the best voice out of all the candidates that auditioned. So let's not praise Disney for giving representation, as companies are not your friends, they're here to make money. When looking at some videos and comments made by black people, the ones that said they actually disliked the casting role said they compared it to a company changing a character's race to pander to the black community, as in like giving straps. And I can see where those people are coming from. If Disney actually wanted to make a movie to make representation, they would make a new movie with a new princess or character. For example, Moana was a pretty popular film that I enjoyed, in which it portrayed Polynesian culture. However, I'm not part of their community, so I can't really rate how good they did the representation, but most of the reviews I've seen are overall positive. So I definitely think they can do something like that again, but with a black princess. Of course, remember, not everyone in the same community believes the same thing. And to make it abundantly clear, I really do hate identity politics and despise it when someone says stuff like, based off of your gender, race, or sexual orientation, you must agree with this or have a certain political alignment. And even though I am more left-leaning, I feel a lot of times more leftists tend to do this, which causes a lot of division. But moving on, another common quote I've seen from people who reacted to this situation is, you do not need the same skin color in order to relate to a character. Of course, this is true. You don't need the same skin tone, gender, etc. in order to relate to a character. So why am I bringing this up? The reason I'm talking about this is that in this context, it's not good that you're using it in a way to say that a certain group of people are bad or racist for saying that they would relate it better if the protagonist was their race. I'll make an analogy to make it easier to understand. Imagine a girl is watching a show and there's 8 characters and one of which is a girl. Of course, naturally, many of the times when this happens, the girl is drawn to the female character. When someone asks the little girl why she likes the female character and then she says, because she's a girl like me, you obviously wouldn't call her sexist for that, because it makes sense. This does not mean that she does not like the male characters or that she can't relate to them. I'm simply saying that girl saying that her favorite character is the girl in the show is such a common occurrence in real life, or like how many shows with a predominantly female cast is usually watched by a predominantly female audience. Something interesting about this analogy is that many people who think representation doesn't matter unconsciously believe that gender representation does matter. That's the reason why shows with a female protagonist has some guys saying that they don't want to watch it. There's a stigma that guys shouldn't watch quote-unquote girly things, and a lot of people believe that boys need specifically a strong male role model, not a girl. Which shows how many people who hated the new Ariel or more right-leaning understand that the representation of the same identity does in fact matter. So why does the same logic not apply to same-race characters? A person saying that they relate better to a character of another race is not racist. Saying, I like it when a character has a similar background as me, does not mean that they're saying, I cannot relate to characters that are not my skin tone or ethnic background. I would actually argue that many POC have been relating to people outside of their race their whole lives. The majority of cartoons or anime that many people watch as a kid don't have as many black characters compared to pale skin characters. So of course they would relate to many white characters. Saying it would be cool to have a character who looks just like me is not the equivalent of saying, I am unable to relate to white people. For example, a while back there was this movie called Turning Red, which was this animated Pixar movie about a Chinese girl who turns into a red panda if she gets too emotional or upset. One of the most infamous reviews that were put on the movie was made by reviewer Sean O'Coley, in which he complained that he hated the movie because, I quote, I was not in it. Explaining that it's not friendly to the audience because it's hard for him to relate, as the main characters are all young girls and the culture in the movie was Chinese. This was really interesting to me because he quite literally unconsciously proved that representation in movies matters. As he explained, quote, "I recognized the humor in the film but connected with none of it. By rooting turning red, very specifically in the Asian community of Toronto, the film legitimately feels like it was made for directors, friends, and immediate family members. Some Pixar films are made for universal audiences, Turning Red is not. The target audience of this feels very specific and narrow. If you are in it, then it might work for you. I am not in it. This was exhausting." Once again, this perspective is very interesting because if you actually think about it, the movie's target audience is very broad. Half of the world population is female, and Chinese people are the biggest population in the world. Not to mention, you do not need to be the same race or gender to relate to the main character, as I already established. But I also mentioned in this video, when you are the same race or gender as the person, it does make it easier to relate, which is why the reviewer did not like the movie. So I imagine how much harder it would be if he was put in other people's shoes for all the movies he's watched. And the majority of the shows did not represent or have traits of him that are similar to his life. I guess you can say he would feel exhausted all the time. Yeah, sure, many people like him may easily be able to say that representation doesn't matter, but they only realize what's wrong until after they're put in someone else's shoes. Common argument number 3. They should make new movies or characters instead of making pre-existing characters a different race. This one I actually agree with 100%. Okay, maybe 99%. That 1% is missing because the only exception to that rule was Spider-Man, because goddamn, that movie was so good. But I believe the reason why all these remakes keep being made instead of them creating original characters is because these companies know that people would eat it up anyways, which I think is really bad. You shouldn't accept like crumbs of representation when it's not proper representation. Disney is very capable of making brand new black characters instead of changing a pre-existing character. Also, I'm not including Ariel into this because Ariel was more of a we just chose the best actor reason. In this conversation, I'm more so talking about turning a fictional character to a different race in animation, since that's more of a choice. And this goes to one of my worries that I have about the Ariel movie. It's not because of something stupid, like the Ariel movie is going to fail because the protagonist is black. It's more like the Ariel live action movie is going to be bad because live actions suck. Like seriously, does anyone even want live action movies? I personally believe that the companies only make live actions just for more money, because why make original characters when you can just recycle what you already know works? Going off the rails here, I do believe that the reason companies make adaptations toward iconic animated series is because animation is typically seen as for kids. I mean, the creator of the Scooby Doo reboot wanted to make a show more for adults, and they literally said it themselves. They removed Scooby Doo so they can make it appeal more for adults, essentially removing an important part of the show in which many people liked in order to make it, quote, less for kids. God, people really need to stop thinking animation or creative aspects is just for kids. So when there's a popular older animation show and they want to push it toward the audience who watched it in their childhood, what they do is make a live action show. Boom, look, it's a show you watched as a kid, but now it's more mature. That's the reason why these live actions suck, because they ruin the magic that was in the original, as it's usually made by people who don't fully understand what made the original series great. The original Ariel movie was very magical and pretty, so that's why some fans criticized the trailer for looking very gloomy in color, when it was a very easy fix by putting up the saturation. Of course, I know that there are going to be people who enjoy the movie though, because I bet the songs are going to be absolute bangers due to the singer's vocals, and Halle Bailey did not take years of training to want to do a bad job on it. So you may be asking me, why does it matter if the live action is not well received? It's because people are already blaming the actor for why the movie is doing really bad, just because of the skin tone. And this is before the movie comes out, by the way. So by the time the movie is out, I have a prediction that what's going to happen is that many people are going to blame the actor for it and review bomb the movie for supposedly, quote, ruining their favorite Disney princess or childhood. And this is not something new. The reason I predict this is because in the past, there was a situation in Europe in which there was a soccer match, and what happened was that during the finals, a few black players missed a shot, and this event went wild, to people saying awful things and being overall disrespectful by bringing up his race, rioting, and destroying property. And this was all because of a sports game. So obviously I'm not joking when I say I'm pretty concerned when it comes to the future of this film, not because of the movie itself. I hate live actions in general. The only live action I ever watched was Sonic, because I pitied the studio for having to spend so much money to fix the design, despite the fact that it was very well deserved. I'm scared because I hope nothing goes wrong in which no one gets harmed or threatened online in situations like this. I mean, we're already getting situations and whole community groups dedicated towards being upset about Halle Bailey. Of course, I'm not saying that you're not allowed to criticize the new Ariel movie. If you say you don't like the new Ariel and you prefer the original, I'm not going to call you racist for it, since I do understand that originals are almost always better than remakes in almost all situations, especially when it comes to live actions. However, if you do something like, I don't know, this, then I'll be very concerned and stay 10 feet away from you. In conclusion, those were my opinions and responses to common arguments and backlash towards the Little Mermaid reboot and race bending in general. Jokes aside, I actually do hope the movie gets at least decent reviews, because I don't want Halle Bailey's career to be affected by people's dislike that she's a different race as a protagonist, because she's obviously really talented and doesn't deserve the hate she's getting for this. So if you don't like the live action, I would just recommend not watching it. I personally decide to pretend the Avatar live action never existed, and it's not that big of a deal. It doesn't affect my life, and I can still enjoy the original animated series without being disrespectful towards anyone who is an actor or worked hard on the live action version of it. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any thoughts, questions, or criticism, please comment them down below, and I'll hopefully reply back to them soon. Thank you!